Heather Chaplin, who unfortunately couldn't make it here today, but she was the one I had pointed out during the Game Critics Rant. She's the founding director of the Journalism Design program at the New School in NYU, and also is the author of a book called Smart Bomb. And are we ready for the switch over? So she sent us a little video.
I thought I would chime in my 2 cents for the Game Developers Conference rant panel. The first thing I want to tell you about is a practice of saloon keepers back during the gold rush times. The saloons in gold mining towns would save the dregs of everybody's whiskey glasses and then put it in a big barrel, and every morning go and toss the dregs of people's whiskey out in the streets. This way, when the miners walked through, the first thing they would get in the morning was the smell of whiskey, which is essentially priming them to want to go in and buy the product. This is often used in literature about addiction studies. So, question, morally insidious, grotesque, taking advantage of people in a vulnerable situation, brilliant and only smart business practice. The truth is it's probably both. So this got me thinking a lot about addiction. I remember in 2007, Jonathan Blow gave a talk that was very controversial, saying that game designers were stealing people's times by building games that ran on sort of an addiction model rather than actually providing them with the most beautiful or rich or rewarding experiences they could have. That led me to Bennett Foddy, who's now at NYU Games Center, who used to be the deputy director at Oxford University of the Institute for Science and Ethics. He's done a lot of work on addiction. He says game design is the design of addiction, that there is something sort of inherently in the interactive process of action, reward, which is creating addiction. Is this inherently a bad thing? No, I'm addicted to coffee, right? We all have the things. You play your game, you create this feeling of addiction. We all know that feeling where you can't stop playing, you lose time, you lose hours. Then the game's over, you move on with your life, no harm done. Okay, question. What happens when the business model changes and games are no longer discrete chunks of time? Here, play this for this amount of time, then you're over, then you walk away. But instead, we now need games in the free-to-play world to be games that people sort of play endlessly, right? What happens to how games get designed then? There's an experiment by B.F. Skinner. I don't know if you remember him, the behavioral scientist from the 50s, kind of scary-looking guy in a white coat. He used to do these experiments to see what the extinction point was on his rats in these cages. He would give them a shot of cocaine. That would be free. The first shot was free. The rats didn't have to pay anything. The next time they wanted some cocaine, they had to push a bar down. The time after that, they had to push it twice and 3 times, and the experimenters wanted to see how many times people would push the bar, and it ended up being thousands and thousands of times. So as Bennett brought up, the games you see, like something like Tiny Tower or something, are essentially exact replicas of these behavioral models that were built, and you sort of wonder, well, why would you do that? Why are you doing that to your player? Do you really want to be a pusher more than sort of a game designer? Now, the other thing this brings me to is that we all know that only about 5% of the people who play these games actually spend all of the money. The term that business people use is whales, which is a term that's borrowed from the slot machine industry. To me, anytime you're taking something from the slot machine industry, you really have to ask yourself what kind of moral ground you're standing on. Again, do you want to be taking advantage of people in a vulnerable moment, creating a game where you get people up to that moment where, in addiction language, they're at the vulnerable moment of their addiction, and that's when you come in for the money. That's when you start monetizing. I would suggest that there is moral culpability here, that this is not a good thing to be engaging in. The other thing that I would point out is it's probably not good for game design, right? Do you really want to be designing games where the game is so boring or so slow or so repetitive that people are willing to pay you to be like released into something more exciting? I think that is a bad idea. So it kind of comes back to the thing about the saloon keepers in the beginning, right? I put out this question like they're diametrically opposed, a good business or, but maybe it's bad. And I would say that this trend is actually not only perhaps morally reprehensible, but actually going to be bad for business if you end up designing down the hole of just feeding people into addiction loops rather than creating experiences that are rich and meaningful for them. Okay, my time is up. Those are my thoughts from New York City. Goodbye, everybody. Signing off from New York. Bye.